Hey guys, so we're just gonna do a little catching up today on just a little bit of notes because um, we're gonna get too far behind here. Not terrible, but that's okay. This is the last slide that we did from last week. If you don't have your note packet with you, you can go ahead and either print one from the notes packets that I posted on Teams, or you can just go back and add these notes later when you're back at school. Okay? This should be the last thing you have written on your note packet. So when we're talking about truths from the creation stories in the Bible, there's just a few important implications of that we want to make note of. First of all of creation is good because it's from God. That means all races, all ethnicities, all groups of people. That is part of that idea, again, that we've talked about of being created in the image and likeness of God, that all humanity is created in God's image and likeness and therefore is good, none better than another. Also, one of the important aspects that has become more significant, I would say maybe in the last 30 or 40 years, there's a new area of theology that has started to become more prominent called eco-theology, which looks at care for creation in the world around us, care for the environment, animals, etc. That a lot of that is founded on the creation stories too, because of course in one of the creation stories, God gives humans care for the garden and tells them to watch over it and tend it. And so we sort of use that as a foundation for that understanding that we're called to care for the earth around us. And last but not least, that we're given that opportunity to share in God's goodness of creation. Okay, so as we're moving on and talking about salvation history and justice, obviously I would hope you guys remember this term, but just to remind you, you've talked about salvation history before. It refers to the story of God's saving action in the world around us. In other words, Christianity has, and Judaism too, by the way, has this important concept that God does act in human history. This is different from, if you remember talking about deism during the modern era in church history, deism was that idea that there is a God, but he's not, doesn't intervene like that watchmaker God that just set the world moving and then sort of backed away. Salvation history says the other, that God is intervening in human history. So that's a really important concept in Christianity, that God does act in human history. Sorry, here we go. When we look at the story of salvation history, there's a few events that kind of become key events that reveal how God acts in the world around us. And for Christians and for Jews, that is the biblical covenants. So I don't know, I hope you guys remember all the way back to your Old Testament class talking about these different biblical covenants and the ways that God intervenes in human history. So if you have a minute to just kind of think about what are the 4 covenants from the Old Testament, and then what is the covenant from the New Testament. Oops, sorry. There are 5, 4 in the Old Testament, and as I said, 1 in the New Testament. So the 4 in the Old Testament, the first one is with Noah. That's that unilateral covenant after the flood. And one of the lessons that we get from that covenant is that God doesn't want to punish us for our sins. He wants to be reconciled with us. The second covenant from the Old Testament is with Abraham. Again, we get this story of God entering into human history. If you think about the covenant that God makes with Abraham, it tells us that he wants to be in a relationship with us and give us sustenance and offer us our best life. The one that is really the most significant, and so the one you should probably put a little star next to in your notes and remind yourself this is the big one, for the Old Testament is the covenant with Moses. That's the Sinai covenant, if you're thinking about the Exodus story from Old Testament, that God hears those who suffer and intervenes on their behalf. And then, of course, we have the Davidic covenant, which is the covenant that for Christians, we believe that God promises us Jesus. And then, of course, we know the New Testament covenant, the covenant with all believers through Jesus. Okay, last but not least, I'm just going to show you really quick. These are what are known as the corporal works of mercy. These come from the prophet Isaiah from chapter 58, where God tells us that we're to act on behalf of what is quote unquote the least of these. So these are the corporal works of mercy. Corporal comes from the word that means body. So corpus, I think in Spanish it's like maybe like cuerpo or something like that. That's the closest translation I can remember, but I can't remember for sure. I'm sure you guys know better than I do. These are all physical actions that we take on behalf of those who are suffering. So your homework is going to be looking at the corporal works of mercy. So I just wanted to show you these really quick from the notes. All right. Have a great day, you guys, and I will see you on Wednesday.